video that showed this man teaching on a big Hebrew roots platform about the reunification of 10 Israel and Judah, and how that particular message is really starting to catch on. Same with the realization of the Sabbath, the 10 Commandments in general, and why should we be keeping those? So I've even seen a little article yesterday where they had a municipality is resetting their 10 Commandments stone. You know how they always these cities used to have the monument with the 10 Commandments on it, maybe in front of the courthouse or something like that. And so they're starting to say, hey, we shouldn't have taken that out, because look what happened. Our morals declined quite considerably after we did that. Okay, first we need to establish a couple of verses about the Creator before we get into sin. Go into Genesis. We all know this, and a lot of this stuff you guys are already going to know. Please bear with me, because I'm thinking that this presentation might be a segue into some other fellowships around the state that might be used. So, Goshen Acres could be participating in spreading this word. So I think that's great. Anyway, who is the Word? In the beginning was the Word. Sorry about that. I have got to learn my buttons. And on the seventh day, Elohim ended his work which he had made, and he rested on the seventh day from all his work which he had made. The Sabbath day was the one day given a name. The rest of them, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, were just numbered. In the beginning was the Word. Now this is where Yeshua comes in. Or he participated in the creation of the world, like we don't necessarily always picture him as the creator. So right here in John, right in the very outset, in the beginning was the Word. And the Word was with Elohim, and the Word was Elohim. The same was in the beginning with Elohim. And all things were made by him, the Word. And without him was not anything made that was made. Who is the Word? And he was clothed with a vesture dipped in blood. That was the wrath coming on the world by Yeshua. His name is called the Word of Elohim. For in 6 days Yahweh made heaven and earth, the sea, and all that in them is, and rested the seventh day. That's in the 10 Commandments. Wherefore Yahweh blessed the Sabbath and hallowed it. Okay. Yeshua, Yah, the Godhead, the Creator. What is sin? Does anybody have any idea? You guys, you nailed it. Yep, that's one of the other ways to see it. Whosoever committeth sin transgresseth also the law. I've brought this up to people who are in the church and say the law's been done away with. But I ask them, what is sin? And I never get a very good answer. It's just like, what is the new covenant? Nobody seems to know in the church. Just very simple. Sin is transgression of the law. Why the confusion? Why are we here where we're at now? What's the deal? How did we get here? How comes the whole world seems to be devastated by the word Shabbat? At least in the Christian circles. Why is it such a heretical thing to talk about? We'll get into that a little bit. We're going to look at some Catholic writings and some other things associated with the Catholic writings as to what they say the reason for the Sunday worship is partly their control. So we see in Ephesians, we wrestle not against flesh and blood. We've all read this many times. But against principalities, against powers, against rulers of the darkness of this world, against wickedness and spiritual wickedness in high places. So, how is it that we can determine who that is? Is there a signal? Is there a sign that tells us with great conviction what that means? Here's the question that was asked of a Catholic hierarchy. Have you any other way? Now this is about Shabbat and how this authority of the Catholic Church presides over the Protestant denominations. So, what's the question? Have you any other way of proving that the Catholic Church has the power to institute feast days? That could read feast days just as well. They have their own, don't they? Their answer was, had she not had such power, she could not have done that in which all modern religionists agree with her. She could not have substituted or instituted the observance of Sunday, the first day of the week, for the observance of Saturday, the seventh day, a change for which there is no spiritual authority, no scriptural authority. So they just said, okay, but why did that happen? How did it happen? What took place in the people and in the governments to create this condition? So Emperor Constantine issued a decree. Look at how late that is. 321. That's quite a ways away from our 250th anniversary of the United States. We tend to shorten the time span as we go deeper into time. So we think about our lifespan, and then it's shorter and shorter and shorter. 321, let the judges and the townspeople and the occupation of all trades rest on the venerable day of the sun. So this is their pompous attitude. The observance of Sunday by the Protestants is an homage they pay to the authority of the Catholic Church. How many of those would agree with that? Do you think the people that go to the Protestant denominations would agree with that? They don't understand. That's very true.
If they recite the Apostles' Creed, they state it.
Right. Sunday was the first day of the week in the East from all antiquity. The sun and the moon, those were the power lights. But then there were those wandering stars called the planets. Mars, Mercury, Jupiter, Venus, Saturn were the 7 deities to whom the Chaldeans dedicated the days of the week. So those were the visible, naked eye bodies in the heavenly bodies. There they are. I'm not going to read that all out. If you want to look at this video later to see what those all mean, but you can see the pagan influence throughout the week. Saturn's Day. You know why it's Saturn's Day? It's the 7th. It's the 7th out there. You know, the closer in planets have the lower numbers. Saturn is the farthest out there and the last naked eye body. So, Elohi distinguished the common days of the week simply by giving their numerical order. But upon the 7th day on which he had rested, in which he had blessed and sanctified, he bestowed the title, the Sabbath of Yahweh thy Elohim. Now Pope Gregory, he liked to say the literal observance of the Sabbath is Antichrist. Now, here's something really interesting. I got my stick out for that. This is the auditorium in the Vatican. Have you guys seen this? What are we looking at? A viper. That's not an accident. These pillars, even, there are fangs, if you look down on that. And the scales. Right there, all those little dotted lines. Then the beady eyes. That's what we're dealing with here. It's not a disguise. It's there for those who are willing to observe, or those that have eyes to see. The viper. Why would you do that? Why would anybody do that claiming to be a Christian religion? So here's where the change took place. How did they enforce this decree? Yes, they did this. And that's a very mild picture. But they did this. Martyrs were abounding. So that which the Council of Laodicea condemns the Judaizing, that's what they called Sabbath keeping. In connection with the Sabbath, and the Council of Orleans called Judaizing in regular regard to Sunday, is enforced by the councils of the Middle Ages under the most cruel penalties. So, for both the proponents and the ones that are keeping the Sabbath, both sides of this issue, all had a very traumatic experience going through the hundreds of years that it took to wash out the Sabbath. So they would cut off your right hand, essentially, was one of the punishments. In general, the church historians derive the name of the people keeping the Sabbath, from their wandering and unsettled life. Of these people they were called Passagians. because they had nowhere to rest. They had no place to lay their head. Who does that sound like? They were constantly on the run. They were hunted down like wild game, the book says. Rome spared no effort to urge the princes to assist in the extinction of the heretics. So they got the government involved, the local government. The church enlisted the local government to persecute people keeping the Sabbath and having the testimony of Yeshua HaMashiach. Sound familiar? Is that coming to us? Yes. When the princes of the southern, see, they wouldn't all think that was a very good idea. Why would we destroy thousands of industrious people? Question, and this came to me this morning. It's about Yeshua, it's about Israel. Was this an attempt, a futile attempt, to scuttle the reunion of the tribes? Because as the Bible was first in a foreign language, you couldn't understand it. You had to have the guy up in the front give you that Latin speech. But the Bible started to make circulations with people's common language. So they started to read it themselves. And they said, hey, wait a minute. What about this and that? What about Shabbat? What about the rest of that? I believe it was because they were refreshing their memory from way, way past. Myriads were killed, sometimes under the greatest cruelty. And the garden of France was changed to a desert. But the army of the Crusaders was followed by something even worse, the Inquisition. This is how they scrubbed the Sabbath. So, how many observers of the Sabbath lost their lives under the tortures of the Inquisition? Only the day of judgment will reveal. Myriads were killed under the greatest cruelties. Yes. Here's where I think that this plays in. We have a collective source in our DNA that recorded this time period. We're mostly from Europe. That took place in Western Europe. This is a new theory, but it's been proven pretty correct. That evidence of an enduring effect of trauma exposed to being passed off to offspring genetically. So we have this in us, this trauma from this period of time, I believe. That's why people are so, don't talk to me about the Sabbath. Don't even go there. I'll leave the room. I think it's something to do with that. It's not only the church. It's that impression in our DNA that was made. Now we had the Reformation. Luther and Calvin, Europe. From the bosom of the Roman Church itself arose the Great Reformation of the 16th century. Now this is interesting, and I think people may generally know this. Not many could read and write, and copies of the Bible were few and in an unknown language, like we said. Justification was sought by meritorious works, So that the true faith in Yeshua had declined, and an inevitable consequence, Yah's holy law was everywhere transgressed. So the Reformation began the spread of the Bible, like we just said. Calvin and Knox and Luther recognized that Sunday observance was based on tradition rather than Scripture. But here's the kicker. My wife and I talked about this years ago. They didn't want to look like Jews. Luther especially. Luther was all on board with the Sabbath, the seventh-day Sabbath being true, but he didn't want to go there. The true sense of the blessedness of the Sabbath rest made man even in paradise. Okay, so so it was entirely lost. And many of the holidays were brought in. We got the warm fuzzies, and we had the Christmas tree, and that all usurped our holy celebrations. The warm fuzzies, if you want, that we should have gotten from them. So what about this Christmas tree? And Jeremiah 10 has it, and we all know that. But I've heard people argue from the church that, no, that's not talking about a Christmas tree. It's something else entirely. But I beg to differ. These guys right here are a symbol of Christmas. I read up on them. Their foundational source was that they would make these little people, and they would embody a protector inside the house. So that's the history of these things. That, who's our protector? I mean, it sure isn't that thing. I'll tell you that. Okay, there's the warm fuzzies. There's your picture. All right. So Jeremiah is going to go down through this little set of verses that we all know. Hear ye the word which Yahweh speaketh unto you, O house of Israel. O house of Israel. Thus saith Yahweh, learn not the way of the heathen. For the customs of the people are vain. For one cutteth a tree out of the forest, the work of the hands of the workman with the axe. There you are. It's a tradition. He even has an axe there. And he's having some hot chocolate or whatever with his boy. That's the first proof that it's a Christmas tree. And they deck it with silver and with gold, and they fasten it with nails and with hammers that it move not, because it'll tip over. See? Nails and screws. It keeps it upright, and then you put colored balls on there. The precious metals, gold and silver. They are upright as a palm tree, but speak not. They must needs be borne. They have to be carried, because they cannot go. Be not afraid of them. Don't reverence them. Don't awe at them. Oh, they're so nice. They're so pretty. For they cannot do evil, neither is it in them to do good. So to think differently about Christmas. And again, I know it's not an issue here. But it is for a lot of people that may see this, and hopefully I didn't stumble around too much to where they ignore me. But okay. This has to do with us. the wonder of the whole pathway of Teshuvah and the conviction of sin. We've done this. We've had this in our life. We've all had a certain amount of this where we are convicted. Forgiveness and holiness are completely woven together. I found this years ago from somewhere, and I didn't get the reference to it. Out of the tapestry of repentant and forgiven ones become truly holy. We'll get to the finish line on that. The proof of his forgiveness or her forgiveness by the grace of Elohim is that his life has been profoundly transformed. Yeah? You pulled a 180. He lives a life totally opposite of what he did before. How many of us have been accused of that? He is surrounded by the merciful act of the Holy One. Yeah. It's something that you give off when you walk into the room. People see it. People know. The love that radiates from Elohim, not from us. It's him in us. Through his life, cascades to others like a fountain of living water. I know this. I've seen this myself. Freedom. Freedom! That concludes today's PowerPoint. Do you have any questions? Probably not, because most of us know these things.